Okay, Facebook's on. Come on, you. All right, here we go. We're in business. All right, everybody. Hello and welcome again to the 8:30 Live. We're doing it every night. I have some good news tonight. Well, I don't know if it's good news. It's news. I mean, it's news about the news. There just wasn't that much going on. There's things to talk about, of course, but there weren't too many things happening. I will start off with the thing that's on the tip of everybody's tongue. Joe Biden did something stupid. Now, I don't really care to get into what Joe Biden did that's stupid because he does a lot of stupid things, a lot of gaffes out there. And so I'm sure everybody's already heard about it, and you can go watch what he did for yourself and read all the analysis on it. But for me personally, I have a very, very lenient view of things that people say in context. I like to give people the benefit of the doubt. I like to assume they had good intentions. And if that's the case, when I watch Joe Biden make his mistakes, I'm just like, all right, listen, the guy isn't so great at words. I mean, he's certainly no Donald Trump, who has the best words. But what am I supposed to do here? Just slam all over somebody for a quote that may or may not have been taken out of context? So what I encourage everybody to do is, if you're worried about the crazy thing that Joe Biden said today, just go watch the video and make a determination for yourself. And, you know, even though the entire interview is like 18 minutes, I say, go watch the whole thing. You want to get the tenor of the piece so that you can make a determination as to whether this was an attempt at a joke or whether this was something that was truly offensive. Or what I should say is, I think it was pretty obviously an attempt at a joke, whether or not in context that joke made sense and they had that sort of rapport to have made that bad joke or not. So I encourage you, go check it out. Another thing I'd certainly like to encourage people to do is go grab this Chrome extension if you're using Google Chrome, which is obviously not on this computer, but there is a Google Chrome extension that lets you just speed up any video by 10%, just by clicking the A and D arrows, or you can set your own buttons, doesn't matter. But the point is, my life is this is a secret that I haven't really talked about, but my life is so much better since I got this extension because I can just zip through videos very quickly. An 18-minute video, if people are talking slowly, I can run it at 2 times or 3 times speed and, get it down to a good 10 minutes and really be able to consume that content. And I don't have to hear and remember everything they've said, but it lets me watch videos so I can get quotes in context quickly and determine really just how bad something is and what the intent was and what have you. So yeah, Joe Biden said something stupid. He says a lot of stupid things. So, go judge for yourself how bad you think it was. What I will say externally to this is Donald Trump also says a lot of stupid things. And a stupid thing that Donald Trump said the other day, everybody jumped on him for. And I think folks should know that it was uncalled for because it's so easy to hate on Donald Trump. And this one could have some serious backfire repercussions. In a press conference not too long ago, Donald Trump made a statement about how they're unleashing a Truth Over Facts campaign, right? They've got a new website, Truth Over Facts. And immediately everybody slammed Donald Trump. Oh, this moron, Truth Over Facts. When will Donald Trump's assault on reality end? All right, listen. Truth Over Facts is a Joe Biden quote. The Truth Over Facts website and Truth Over Facts campaign is I think, brilliant Donald Trump sponsored faux investigative series that pretends to dive into the backstories of all of Joe Biden's gaffes. It's predicated, or the titular gaffe is when Joe Biden says, "We choose to believe truth over facts," which makes for a glaring headline. And then the first gaffe they're investigating is The Thing. Now, I'm not going to go into it because I don't have the clip, and you really got to watch the clip to appreciate it. But then the first episode of Truth Over Facts, which is a pretty funny 2-minute and 20-second spot, promises to get a sketch artist to draw and expose who or what is a dog-faced pony soldier. Now, listen, I'm not voting for Trump, but there is a part of me that really hopes to watch that episode, that hope that this wasn't just a joke and that they actually are releasing a series of like gaffe videos, because the idea that somebody's going to try to sketch a dog-faced pony soldier seems freaking hilarious. So I will finally say that if the entire spot of Truth Over Facts, if its entire purpose or objective was to get people to jump on Trump for saying truth over facts and then turn that around when people realize that it was a Joe Biden quote, I would say that was pretty much worth the expenditure. And really, I actually wrote an article about this. I should probably release it. But the point is, the really important part about the Truth Over Facts campaign is not just what it says or how easily it's going to put talking points of Joe Biden's gaffes into the hands of your average American, let alone Trump supporter. It's that this was a very highly produced ad. A lot of money went into this, and it's highly experimental. And it's highly experimental and highly expensive early on in the campaign. And it really, really, really indicates just how much more money Donald Trump has than Joe Biden, how much more money he had than all of the Democratic primary challengers put together, and how he's ready to spend that money right now to test things that will be put into action in November, or I guess leading up to November. The data that they're going to get back from producing something that's kind of funny and definitely viral-able in Trump's network is going to be pretty useful. Whereas, what are the Democrats doing? Where is the money? Donald Trump has 5 times the amount of money, basically, as Joe Biden does. The Truth Over Facts ad campaign is not just an indication of the new sorts of tactics that Republicans are trying, but the fact that they have so much of a resource advantage that they are able to try wacky new ideas, and they're going to reap the benefits of it. So this isn't, an urgent plea for everybody to go donate to Joe Biden. And certainly they started off on a Joe Biden said something stupid thing today, but you really should watch the Truth Over Facts campaign. Then you should go, actually, I'm going to publish this article that I wrote on Medium tomorrow, and I'll put it on Facebook. So stay tuned for that. But then there was an NPR article that came out at the end of last month, so very recently, that laid out the foundational campaign finance numbers for both campaigns. It's really disturbing if you want a Democratic win. It doesn't help that Joe Biden's own viral moments tend to be ones that make him look like a fool, but it will certainly not be helped by the fact that Donald Trump is poised to unleash a barrage of negative campaigns. So the last thing I want to say is all these negative things that people are saying within the liberal ecosystem about Joe Biden, and people are like, don't focus on the negatives. If you think that Donald Trump is not going to have literally $1 billion to focus on Joe Biden's negatives, if we don't figure out how to cope with these negatives now, we're going to have a super bad time, really, really unpleasant in the next couple of months. All right, I'm going to read some comments because clearly when you talk about the Democratic nominee or the presumptive Democratic nominee, people get all sorts of opinions. So let's just have a look. Boom, 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 boom. Dorian Key, hey, I got here on time today. Thanks, Dorian. It's good to see you. James Morris King, Biden did nothing wrong. Hee hee. I don't know if James is actually being sarcastic or not. James has I've known James for a long time. James also happens to be black, and that's sort of a giveaway as to the sort of thing that Biden said. But he said something that was specific or relevant to the black community. I don't know if James is joking or not because he's not like a super progressive, and I feel like I don't know if he's not a super progressive, but he's very steeped in the practical needs of politics and of building power. And everything that I've seen would say that it's entirely possible he doesn't think it's a problem, or that he did nothing wrong, because at this point we just need to sort of coalesce around the nominees. So James, I would love some further further elucidation on that. Dorian Key, thoughts on a Hong Kong announcement coming out of the General Secretary meeting of the People's Republic. She is imposing security laws on Hong Kong in possible violation of previous agreements. Yeah, okay. I didn't write that down, but that is pretty big news. And I guess I'll address that next, right after we finish up this talking about Joe. Julianne, it's Joe Biden. He doesn't always say the right things. Do you remember all of his gaffe videos? Yeah, that's sort of the point. He's made bad jokes before, and even not bad jokes, even things he meant that were bad. Just like when he said, poor kids are just as smart as white kids. Whew. My God, Joe, what are you thinking? But look, people say that Joe Biden has dementia. I don't think so. Donald Trump might have dementia. I don't know what Donald Trump was like 5 years ago, 10 years ago. I know for a fact that Joe Biden has run for president multiple times, and every time he ran for president, everybody was like, this gaffe machine is likable, but going to destroy his career. And guess what? Joe Biden lost every single presidential primary except this one. And I think, personally, it just goes to show that we did not end up with the best candidate because, well, either that or all the other candidates were terrible, but I don't believe that. But the idea that Joe Biden is the safe candidate when he couldn't win, if we're saying we want to appeal to voters who defected from the Democratic Party, or we want to appeal to voters who are in the middle, and in the 90s and early 2000s, this guy couldn't win a primary. All it says is voters who identify with that era and that time of compromise and that sensibility of politics didn't like him enough to vote for him then. Why are they going to vote for him now? Yeah, he's a throwback maybe, but all we can do is hope. I mean, we can do more than hope. We have to actively campaign. And I don't really like Joe Biden, but I will actively campaign for him for a variety of reasons that I will lay out in a very, very long article when I do my presidential endorsement, because I've been thinking about the rationale for why I actually believe Joe Biden is better than Donald Trump. And I feel like I've got a pretty solid one. I can't really do anything without a good reason. I just don't. That's not how I roll. I think that's one of the reasons people respect my opinion in politics. I got a tweet the other day from somebody who said they're supporting a candidate other than mine, but they'd really like to hear what I have to say about the opponent because they respect my opinion, and maybe they missed something. I found that very, very that was flattering. And so, I'm pretty well known for if I believe something or I vote a certain way, I have delineated the reasons for it in my mind, and I'm going to share that about Joe Biden soon enough. But I don't believe he's like he couldn't win. He's run for president many times, couldn't win any other time. He's probably not the cream of the crop. Dorian Key, in response, okay, Dorian asked another question about the China situation, so we'll get back to that. But this will be in response to you feel Taiwan should declare independence. If president, what is your Taiwan foreign policy? Oh my God. I'm not running for president. I ran for public advocate in New York City, and I went to the Hasid community and, to get to vie for an endorsement. And they asked me what my position on Israel was. Now, I'm Jewish, but I'm a peacenik. And I also feel for folks who are, less advantaged. And I certainly think that, anyway, the point was I was like, two-state solution. I believe in the idea of two states. And they responded, sure, but how do you get there? And I was like, I'm not running for president. I'm running for public advocate. But if Dorian wants me to be running for president, I will give my analysis of the situation. That said, to wrap up the Biden situation, Michael Kaplan, Biden occasionally misstates things that sound wrong. And sometimes that are wrong. But the primary is over. I believe that Joe Biden is a good man in large part because I don't believe that Barack Obama would appoint a racist or generally bad man as his running mate. Trump actually praised Nazis. Again, I really do think that the gulf between Donald Trump and Joe Biden is quite large, like exceedingly large. And the people who put them in the same bucket because Joe Biden passed the crime bill and Joe Biden was in favor of the Iraq War, and Joe Biden with the Tara Reade situation. I don't think that they're equivalent for many, many reasons. One of the biggest reasons being that, and this is particularly speaking to the Tara Reade piece, and this is a little highlight of what I'm going to be writing about in my endorsement. It's not that any of those things are wrong or disproven, or that, that we should disregard them. But Joe Biden, many of his mistakes are in the past, which isn't to say that you should forget them, but it's important to understand that he's done things in the past and he acknowledges a lot of them, and he has promised to change his ways. And on some of those things, he has changed his behavior and his policy positions, and he's further in the process of changing them. And Donald Trump is completely unrepentant and exactly the same person he was when he made every vulgar statement and did every untoward act. So the big thing for me, the greatest indicator for me, is that Joe Biden, at the beginning, basically at the beginning of the primary, or in the early phases of the primary, a lot of people, obviously the touching women, like the personal space thing, like it's just disgusting. Like, he's so close to people. Why? And just so weird. And just, how could anybody not think that's uncomfortable? But, and this is the important part, he was confronted with that. And whether or not you think that what he did was wrong or acceptable or it was a different time, I don't care. It was a different time. I don't understand how that could be okay at any time. Like, I don't like touching people. I don't like people touching me. Oh God, there was one dude who I used to go hang out with. I go to karaoke and he'd always come up and do this to my hair. Don't touch my hair, people. Just, if you see me, don't touch my hair. All right. It's not because I like the way my hair looks per se. I just think that, like, hair is, there's a lot of it. It's thick hair. It's like, and you put your hands in it, and like whatever gunk is in your hair is just getting. I literally have to go take a shower and wash my hair after that, because it's not like something smooth that I can just go wash off. It's a real production to like get the stickiness of your hands out of my hair. All right. Anyway, point being, Joe Biden was confronted about this, and he said that he understood the critique and that he was going to change his behavior. Since that moment, he has been running for president. A spotlight has been on him, and there's not been a single story or video or statement that Joe Biden has touched a woman in a way that made her feel uncomfortable. Now, you could say that's his aides stepping in. You could say he's doing that because he's running for president. But at the end of the day, he's doing it for a reason. Somebody got the message. He has changed his behavior, and he is showing that he's capable of accepting criticism and doing something better. Now, this puts him miles and miles ahead of Donald Trump, who, when he ran for president, said that he would just grab women by their genitals, and that was fine. He never walked that back. He said he would release his taxes, and he never did that. He said he wouldn't divest from his business, and he hasn't. He just doesn't freaking care. The man is incapable of self-introspection and being anything better than what he is, which is a freaking morass of immorality and loathsome, pestilent hate. So in that regard, Biden comes out leagues ahead, because at the very least, whether you think he's a good person or not, I think he's capable of being better. And I will take that over somebody who is demonstrably disinterested in improving the kind of person they are for anything or anyone, even for an entire country of people who depend on them for their livelihood and security and everything else that comes with being president of the United States. Yes, that's what's going to be in my secret endorsement. All right, you got it out of me, folks. Well, a lot of it. Simon Sachs says, hi, Ben, and I say, hi, Simon. Happy Friday. Dorian Key, Biden is still 11 points ahead in polling and ahead in Ohio. That's still the best we've been in this race. Whoopee. Whoop-de freaking do. Dorian Key, Biden has faux pas, but Trump has them also, and much worse. Why isn't he getting dumped on? Trump's been getting, the thing is, Trump's been getting dumped on extensively. Trump's been getting dumped on so much that people think it's a freaking conspiracy how much he gets dumped on. There's the biggest problem, the difference is that everybody who doesn't like Trump because of those things has abandoned him. And they have no problem bringing that sense of that way of thinking and that caring about those sorts of detractions. They have no problem transferring that to a Democratic nominee. The people who don't care about those things still support Trump. So it's not that Trump isn't getting dumped on, it's that his base doesn't care, whereas almost by definition, the Democratic base at this point does care, because that's one of the things that drives people away from Donald Trump. Julianne, he's also said off-color statements about Indian people. He has? Uh-oh, I didn't know that. I mean, I'm not surprised. He said all sorts of ridiculous nonsense. Oh, God, Joe Biden. I mean, oh, God. James Morris King, the quote, did nothing wrong meme. Generally, I don't think these kinds of incidents matter politically. We're talking now about the dumb thing Joe Biden said in his interview with Charlemagne. The optics aren't great, but some politicians don't really suffer too much from these kinds of things. Donald Trump, for example, the Teflon Don. Generally, news stories have salience when they confirm ideas we already have about a candidate. The idea that, quote, Joe Biden makes gaffes is already out there. So this slots in with that idea. But in a funny way, his gaffe-prone speaking is already priced into the people. I actually agree with this statement that, people make the determinations about which candidate they support or not. And insofar as Joe Biden, we all knew that this dude lets his mouth fly, and we've known it for years and years and years. And so this is, quote, priced in. This is something that everybody's already added to their calculation of whether Biden is a good candidate. And the fact that he wins despite this indicates largely that people don't care, which is kind of an advantage, because at this point, Joe Biden can say just about anything and it gets written off as a gaffe, and people accept that Joe Biden makes gaffes, and they decided they don't care enough to keep that from voting for him. Now, some people care enough, but as long as Joe Biden isn't overtly mean or cruel in the way that Donald Trump is, people will probably continue to just be like, oh, it was a gaffe. Oh, he's still a good person. Oh, he didn't say what he meant. Simon Sachs, are you still going to have the fireplace background through the summer, or will you go with a blizzard background? That's a great question, and I have thought about that. And my thinking was I will continue to wear a sweater and run the fireplace. But if folks would like to see something else on the background, I certainly never thought that I would continue be doing this. When did I start this? Oh my God, in February? What month is it? May? I never thought I'd still be doing this. James Morris King, which also explains, we're back to Biden, which also explains why Biden has done so much better this time around, because people accept his gas as opposed to before when he had to compete against Barack Obama. He has a solid coalition behind him. They've mostly been inoculated to his gaffes, and he's running against a guy whose own issues are a funhouse mirror to Biden's. So it's kind of hard to make the language argument stick with the voters who are already attached to him. Yes, admittedly, well, I want to say there's nobody better for Biden to have gone up against, but we kind of said that about Hillary Clinton. But in retrospect, I actually think that, Donald Trump was the perfect foil to Hillary Clinton. No, that's not true either. No. But in some regards, yes, it's true that Donald Trump is like a funhouse mirror of Joe Biden. They're both white dudes who are old, who say crazy things, and it's just one of them says crazy things which aren't cruel, and the other one says crazy things which are cruel and maybe slides us towards a dictatorship, right? Julianne. And then we'll get to the next topic because this is the last comment, which means we'll have exhausted the conversation on Joe Biden unless other people want to weigh in. And everybody's free to comment. Let's hear it. Julianne, don't most people believe in the two-state solution? Oh, we're back on Israel. This is great. This will be a perfect segue into international relations and to Dorian's questions about China. And by the way, guys, if you are not familiar with what's happening in China, you are missing out because World War III is probably not going to happen because Donald Trump doesn't care about democracy. But in another world, don't most people believe in the two-state solution? We're talking about Israel right now and Palestine. I feel like there are extremists on both sides, probably who would like us to believe otherwise. I think we know what we need to do, but extremists are preventing it. They want all or nothing, and this is never, ever going to work. No one in this is a saint, but each side will have to portray themselves. No, but each side will portray themselves as saints while demonizing the other. Well, the answer to your question is I don't know if most people believe in the two-state solution. I think that most American Jews believe in the two-state solution. I do not believe that most American evangelicals believe in the two-state solution. I do not necessarily believe that most Republicans believe in the two-state solution. I am not sure that the right wing of Israel believes in this two-state solution. I'm not even 100% sure that a lot of the Arab nations believe in the two-state solution. I think the two-state solution was something which made a lot of sense at one time, and there was broad consensus around it. But as the political dynamics have evolved, particularly as Israel has taken more and more Palestinian land and land on the West Bank without repercussion, the calculus as to whether or not a two-state solution is desirable has changed, as had the likelihood as a result of a two-state even being feasible, because the more land that Israel takes and the less the Israeli leadership wants to achieve a two-state solution, the more difficult it is to reverse the degree of settlement and political engagement Israel has undertaken in the area which would make up the Palestinian state. Now, there are a lot of concerns on both sides. Israel has some valid security concerns regarding the way that the original 1967 borders were drawn. And of course, the Palestinians have a lot of really valid claims that, hey, we used to live here. So I actually don't know the answer as to whether the two-state solution is actually the consensus anymore. I think a lot of people will say it is. I think even leaders will say it is, with the understanding that it's not popular enough to force their hands on anything. And it speaks to that demonization. We've just gotten to a point where the demonization has gone so far, and lines have become so difficult to move that that it's not clear where the future lies. I, as I said, believe in a two-state solution, but even I have to admit, when I go to Passover and get yelled at for, not yelled at, whatever, my family's cool. It's just that it's like 9 people trying to tell one person. So at the last Passover, we did actually not last Passover because that was coronavirus Passover. We didn't get to this part, but 2 Passovers ago, I went and, my brother, who's the other liberal, and his fiance, just like, oh, dinner's over. Whoop, let's go talk in the other room. And I got into a conversation with one of my uncles, who was sitting next to me, who has a house in Israel, who immediately was like, so, about Israel. And then everybody had to just slowly, over the course of an hour, pull up a chair around us and weigh in on my bad opinions on Israel. But, I have to admit it is a thorny problem, and even my support for two-state solution does suffer from a fair number of nigh intractable problems. They also suffer from nigh intractable problems, which they will admit as well. But because there are intractable problems on both sides, it then becomes almost impossible to reach any sort of compromise. It's tough. It's tough. Let's talk about Taiwan. Maybe that'll be easier. Deidre Levy, actually, it would be great to have coexistence, but it's been dangerous for both sides. Coexistence. I once was a proponent of a one-state solution, but where everybody lived in peace and harmony, and then that's just really not feasible, because then you lose the idea of the Jewish state. Well, you can have one of two things in that case. You can have a Jewish state, or you can have an apartheid state where people who are non-Jews don't get to decide the future of wherever of the government which controls the land on which they live, because it's pretty soon people who are not Jews would outnumber people who are Jews, unless you had massive immigration restrictions, and even then you still need laws to prevent people who are non-Jews from maybe eventually overtaking the Jewish population. So it is tough stuff, and I actually, folks know this a lot better than me. I watch their lives. I had a friend who did a live, who was actually a very a conscientious objector who was in Israel. I'm not going to say his name because I'm not sure sometimes he tells me that he doesn't like people knowing this about him, so I'm not going to say his name. But I watched his live when coronavirus started on the Israeli-Palestinian situation and on the Zionist movement. And there's still this is such a complicated issue that there's so much for me to learn, and I've been looking at it for some time. Okay, so let's get to the China stuff. Perfect segue. Speaking of who controls what, and Dorian Key mentioned, what do you think about what's happening in Beijing? So Beijing had its party congress, and basically China has decided that Hong Kong is no longer a semi-autonomous city-state. So just to give folks background, back during the Opium Wars in the 1800s, Hong Kong was given to the United Kingdom. And this was because the United Kingdom could not figure out what to sell the Chinese, who were absolutely content with everything they had, being the richest, most productive nation on earth. And so they decided to sell them opium. The British had opium, the Chinese didn't have opium, and opium sells very well because people get addicted. So they introduced opium to the Chinese market. Now, China has a lot of people, and at first it wasn't much felt or cared about. But soon enough, it spread, and China instigated maybe the first truly documented war on drugs. They basically were like, wow, this shit is terrible. People should not be smoking opium. So instead of rounding up all the opium addicts, they did what you should really do in a war on drugs and went for the distributors and suppliers, the white people. I'm sorry, maybe I shouldn't have said that. But, they were like, Britain, stop. And Britain was basically like, no, you may have more people, and you may be able to produce a lot of stuff, and you may be content with the things you have, but we have guns now, really big guns, and we will shoot you. And so that's what happened. There was a war. Actually, there are two wars, the Opium Wars and the Boxer Rebellion. And at the end of all of this fighting, Britain got the right to sell opium, which was bad for China, and they got a port of their own, Hong Kong, which is an island with a fantastic natural harbor. After World War II, decolonization. Well, actually, I take it back. This didn't have to do with decolonization. What China gave to Britain, because China was never officially colonized, which, actually America had a huge part in this with the open door policy. All right, I digress, but only ever so much. The European imperial powers had carved up most of the world, and they get to Asia. China's really big, and they're like, China's China's big, it's tough to govern, but I think we can do it. I think we can do it, boys. So they try to carve up China into spheres of influence. And as they're locking this down, the United States, which has just become a world power, this is the 1800s, they've just sent their gunships to Japan with Commodore Perry. And they're like, whoa, everybody calm down, slow your roll. We did not get here in time to get a cool sphere of influence, so you all have to stop. You are disallowed from colonizing Asia, and we'll go to war with you over that. So the United States basically saved a large chunk of East Asia from being colonized because it didn't want the European powers to beat it to the punch. America, always doing the right thing after it exhausts all other options. Regardless, because China wasn't officially colonized, Britain had to make a deal with it. It made a deal which gave it control of Hong Kong for 100 years. This was in 1897. In 1997, the territory of Hong Kong was handed back to China with much fanfare. I actually, because I am old, remember watching this on TV. There were lots of fireworks. It was quite nice. And I felt like, this is probably a good thing. Except for the fact that I did not know that the communist government sucks butt. Now, it is good that colonialism sort of ended. I mean, depends how you look at it, but the old imperial ways did pass. Neo-colonialism is a thing, but the old imperial ways passed, and China received Hong Kong back from the United Kingdom in 1997. However, it was guaranteed to Hong Kong in this handover because of everything that happened in, the Cold War, where China, became communist, and, the West didn't want to help commies. It was agreed that Hong Kong, in its return to China, would be allowed to maintain its separate government and a constitution granted to it by the British. Now, British rule in Hong Kong was not a walk in the park. It was racist, it was imperialist, but it certainly granted the citizens of Hong Kong the freedoms, eventually, of British subjects. So we're talking freedom of speech, freedom of press, free elections, etc., etc. And Hong Kong was very afraid, the citizens of Hong Kong were very afraid that they would lose these freedoms when the transition happened with China, and not without cause. For, what are we in now, 2020? This was 1997. For 23 years or so, the West had enough power and enough will, I suppose, or motivation to ensure that Hong Kong's treaty was respected. The treaty granting it another 100 years or 50 years, granting it 50 years of semi-autonomous rule under the British Constitution. So, fast forward to today. There were, as you may have noticed or read, lots and lots of pro-democracy protests as China tried to pass a law which would allow it to extradite people from Hong Kong, basically at its leisure, thereby persecuting anybody who disagreed with the regime in Beijing. So what Dorian's talking about is the fact that at the Communist Congress recently, it was decided that Beijing would strip Hong Kong of its constitutional rights, which were bestowed upon it by the British, which is causing everybody in Hong Kong to flip the F out, because now, whereas the pro-democracy protesters sort of won and beat China, now China is flexing its muscles, and if this goes down, there'll be nothing, not even a piece of paper, to stop China from coming in and basically shooting up the joint if Hong Kongers reject Beijing or Chinese autocracy. This is really bad. This is really bad. A bastion of democracy is falling in Asia. And we've already lost largely the Philippines. And of course, there's, North Korea, which is communist. And now what? There's Japan and Taiwan and South Korea. There were 4 tigers. Now there's presumably going down to 3. So that brings us to the question of Taiwan. Taiwan, another complicated, thorny issue. What is the deal with Taiwan? Well, when the communists took power in China in 1951, they did so by defeating in a civil war the Kuomintang, or the Nationalist Party, which had taken over or was the governing party of the Republic of China. We spoke with the Republic of China a few nights ago because the Republic of China owes some investors in the United States $1.6 trillion from 100 years ago. They're not getting that money, but whatever. If anything, Taiwan should pay that, because when the Kuomintang lost the Civil War, or the revolution, whatever you want to call it, the leadership under Chiang Kai-shek fled to the island of Formosa. They set up their own government in exile on what became known as Taiwan. Now, the island of Formosa technically does belong to China. And so the government established there, really is a rebel government that claims to be the government of China, of all of China, of mainland China, that camps out on this island that mainland China also claims is its own. So for folks who have been unaware of American foreign policy with China for the last 50, 70 years now, most of it revolved around a fiction known as the One China policy. Actually, that's not true. This was established when Nixon was around, I believe, and he did his trip to China. So that's only in the 60s, not 51. But the One China policy. The One China policy is an agreement that we can all get along with mainland China if we just pretend that Taiwan is part of China. And likewise, Taiwan wants there to be one unified China as well, except they believe that they represent all of China. Now, for many, many years, Taiwan's government was acknowledged by the West as the actual government of China. We didn't recognize Mao Zedong's communist China. But when the United Nations was created, this sort of changed because the Soviet Union demanded that communist China take the seat at the table in the Security Council. Okay. So that's a lot of backstory, but it's important to understand what's going on. China, then, is one component of one country, two systems. Hong Kong is kind of the other component. One country, two systems. As I say, Communist China, which is governed by the CCP, Chinese Communist Party, and then Taiwan and Hong Kong, which are both democratic. They're both democracies. All right, so Hong Kong goes down. What should we do about Taiwan? In the 60s or 70s, around the time in the 50s. In the 50s, right after they won the Civil War, the Communist Party was amassing troops on the border with Taiwan, preparing for an invasion. But then, the United States decided to go to war with Korea. And in the Korean War, Korea had been split in half, and the communists were rolling down from the north into the south, kind of winning the war. So the United States comes in and is like, listen, we're going to help you out. And they start pushing the communists back, way back, actually far further back than the original dividing line between communist and capitalist Korea. They go all the way to this thing called the Yalu River. The Yalu River being the border with China. China, which was about to go to war with Taiwan and take the island for itself, realized, wait a tick, we don't want the United States next door. They have a lot of guns. So they roll up, take their army, and start moving into North Korea. They push the United States all the way back. Not all the way back to the tip of Korea, but all the way back to where the original dividing line was. Almost serendipitous how that worked out. In any event, that's how we get North and South Korea today. The important part is it prevented Communist China from taking over Taiwan. Since that point, the United States military alliance with Taiwan is largely the only thing that's kept Beijing from invading the island. Taiwan has gone through successive democratic governments and successive attempts to declare independence. It is not the will of the United States that this tiny little island declare independence from China, because that would call into effect the United States' security alliance with Taiwan at a moment when China would almost guaranteed declare war. Because remember, all of our foreign policy is predicated on this, quote, one China policy that maintains the fiction that there is only one government in China. If Taiwan declares independence from China, that means it's a war. Or does it? It certainly means that the United States will be asked to enter a war, and it's a war with a country which it may or may not be able to defeat in that theater. Now, James Morris King might know better, but defeating China in its literal waters, that is to say, its nearby coastal waters, from across the ocean is no easy feat. So, given what's happened in Hong Kong, A, question posed by Dorian, should Taiwan declare independence? And B, if and when that happens, what do you do as the United States president? Oh, this is such a tough one. The answer really depends on where you think this is going to go. Of course, that's what all answers depend on. I guess, one, I don't think that Taiwan should declare independence. China has made no moves against Taiwan's democracy, and I don't think they will because of the security agreement or security understanding that Taiwan has with the United States. It's just too risky and doesn't make that much sense for them. Hong Kong is undisputably their territory, and even though they are breaking a treaty with the British, who's going to go to war over that? This is why there's no such thing as international. There is no such thing as international law, people, because there is no such thing as international law enforcement. There's nobody who holds nations to account. So there you go. There's no international law. So what do you like? It sucks that Hong Kong is having its constitution violated, and it sucks that there was a treaty to maintain that constitution for another 20 years. But there's nobody who's going to enforce that contract. Taiwan is slightly different insofar as we've had a long-standing security agreement and understanding with Taiwan. We've sold them a butt ton of military hardware. And Taiwan is a vigorous, independent democracy and economy. So what do you do? Now, this is the really tough part. I don't think that Taiwan should declare independence. I think that's inviting a real problem with China, obviously. But actually, from their perspective, in this moment, as China moves on Hong Kong, this would be the opportune time, maybe the only time for them to declare independence. Because China is preoccupied. They're trying to move in on Hong Kong. And if Taiwan declares independence, you could get a twofer where the world's democracies step in and are like, we're going to fight for Taiwan, and your moves on Hong Kong are unacceptable. And if we're going to fight this war, we might as well put these things together and make the double demand. At the very least, you roll back on one of them to get the other, and then you've avoided World War III. However, if I were president, I would absolutely restate our security commitments to a democratic Taiwan. But I don't see the need to roll back the one China policy. That fiction makes everybody over there happy. And as long as Taiwan gets to maintain its democracy, I actually think that the United States will outpace China in the long run on the assumption that we have good and competent leadership. And you're saying, I'm the president at this moment, so I have faith in that. However, given the current leadership, this would be our moment to take out China, because we can't maintain our superpower superior status indefinitely, given the way things are going politically in this country. That being said, this would be the absolute worst administration to prosecute a war with China. And it's probably not really worth it. It would be devastating to the global economy. We certainly don't have right now the money to do it or the interest to do it, nor will any of our allies really be interested in prosecuting that war. There is, after all, a global pandemic going on. So if you're Taiwan, do you declare independence? I don't think so. I think it's a good moment. No, I don't think so. Nope, you don't. Because what? All your allies are absolutely distracted. They're at their nadir of likelihood to come to your aid. Even though Hong Kong is at risk and you're declaring independence could save Hong Kong, the momentary risk of not having your allies back you up is far too large. So you can't declare independence. Does Hong Kong declare independence once the pandemic is over? Well, it'll take a long time for the United States to clear up the mess that the pandemic has put it in and that Donald Trump has put it in. So I'm thinking you put this off as long as you possibly can, and you pray to God that the EU, Great Britain, and the United States get their ducks in a row, get their economies humming, and pull ahead economically and militarily of China in the next 100 years. And in the interim, you want to shore up those commitments. And yeah, I would, again, restate our military security alliance with democracies in the Far East. Definitely don't want to go to war. Definitely, if they declare independence, you got to be like, you can't instigate this thing. China wants to be aggressive. We will slap down aggression, but you can't instigate this thing. Because we're just not in a position to really do that. And hopefully the Chinese system of government, even though it doesn't look like it's headed this way, I still maintain hope that it will start to show societal fissures that lead it to be more and more democratic over time. Although the authoritarian panopticon is real and upon us, we have a lot of challenges facing us. And actually that is probably the main reason that we cannot. Yeah. So the answer is no, Taiwan should not declare independence. And two, I would not, if I were the president, I would reaffirm commitments to their democracy, but I would absolutely not encourage them to declare independence. And I would not be going over there to start shit because of Hong Kong. There are so many things which the United States needs to get a grip on before it has the capacity to project power in that way again. And really, the best type of power is soft power. Winning hearts and minds is so much more valuable and long-term stable than trying to batter people into submission, particularly a country like China, which is large and has its own regenerative capacity because of its long history, deep cultural roots, and huge set of resources, not just the land, but human capital. All right, let's get to some comments because, man, I just went on like a whole freaking thing. All right, Timothy Francis Thompson. But where was the opium grown? Well, that opium grown, I believe, was grown in the what do you call it? Not Near East, but like, oh God, like the Afghanistans and such of the world. They grew it in their other holdings in like India, but like in the Jammu Kashmir region, which is Central Asia. Boom. There you go. Ah, yes, James Morris King. The Opium Wars, Britain's second finest hour, right after getting super jealous of the Portuguese triangle trade and setting out to do slavery bigger and better than those filthy continentals. James goes on. Also, the coolie trade was a smashing success. Am I right? Hey, listen, we could talk about British history and the British Empire for a long time. Simon Sachs posts a link. Administration, Trump routing number, bank revealed coronavirus response. Not sure what that is. Oh, because I can't see link previews I can't see the link previews. I can only see the link text. So I don't know what that is, but thank you for posting information. People love information, particularly on this program. Julianne Ballington. I don't know if I believe Tara Reid or not. All right, going back to Joe Biden. Let's do it. Long. And rightly so. I don't know if I believe Tara Reid or not. She seems like a troubled person. She shares this with Norma McCorvey, Jane Roe. Both of these women may have experienced. Jane Roe is, the plaintiff in Roe v. Wade, and it came out the other day that, Jane Roe or Norma McCarvey had become, after Roe v. Wade was decided, a anti-abortion crusader. But on her, there was a documentary, and now that she's on her deathbed, she has admitted that she was only an anti-abortion crusader for money. True story, look it up. Okay, so Julian says Tara Reade has a lot in common with Norma McCorvey, Jane Roe. Both of these women may have experienced some form of trauma. In Norma's case, she was abused and tormented. However, this has to lead to an extremely troubled adulthood for both women. Both of these women were incapable of making good adult decisions. Reade has repeatedly had bad encounters with adults around her. She is incapable of having a normal functioning with people. For me, as a woman and feminist, that makes me question her. We are allowed to question. Again, it is extremists who do not want us to question, but blindly believe. All I want is an investigation, and for Biden to be assumed, and for Biden, I'm going to say you mean presumed not to be guilty until proven innocent, but you have written the opposite. But based on the context you provided, I'm going to go out on a limb and say, you mean for Biden to not be assumed guilty until proven innocent. And then there's a link to the New York Times. So check that out. New York Times doing some heavy hitting stuff. Check out the Ben Smith piece on Ronan Farrow, I guess. Oh yeah, and Matt Lauer wrote an op-ed. Last person you want to hear from. But the hilarious thing, I read the Matt Lauer op-ed. Matt Lauer claims to have fact-checked Ronan Farrow by interviewing people that Ronan Farrow declined to interview to fact-check his own work. And all those people were like, why didn't Ronan Farrow talk to me? So, geez, check it out. First off, the integrity of our news and media is absolutely critical to the functioning of our democracy. And if we get into a state where we will accept shoddy reporting and no fact-checking because the people who are doing the reporting are going after people we don't like, then we feed into the delegitimization of the media that Trump is constantly trying to build. So let's not allow that to happen. Let's read all of our favorite writers, and let's make sure that we have their sourcing and that they're protecting their sources, but that they are, in fact, doing that sourcing. That's just so absolutely incredibly important, particularly in this day and age when everything that feeds the narrative that the media lies, particularly if they are lying, is a blow to the very foundations of our society. Dangerous times, folks, dangerous times. James King, both the U.S. and China actually have the same assumption. The U.S. would win a sea battle. The U.S. would win a sea and land war. Are you shitting me? We'd win a land war in Asia? But the Chinese military has re-geared itself to totally optimize around technological attrition. Oh, really? So we would win a sea and land battle. We could even invade China successfully, but we would be dragged down in like Vietnam, Afghanistan times a billion. Yeah, that would be terrible. Listen, we don't want to be there, people. We don't want to be there, people. We really want soft power. I mean, the thing that destroyed the Soviet Union was our capacity to produce economically and the allure of Western freedom and, yes, capitalism, but, to a lesser extent, the fact that you could be successful in the United States. Part of the problem with late-stage capitalism, although people say it's late stage, but I don't know why people assume that it's the end of capitalism. We assume it's late stage, but what if we're just middle stage, huh? You ever think about that? But part of what made the United States so powerful was that whatever form of capitalism as it had, and I would say a highly regulated form of capitalism that was more akin to the social democracies of Western Europe than the United States of today, whatever it was, that successful middle class was a huge demonstration that the United States knew what it was doing and that its model was correct. The absolute inequality that we're experiencing today sends the signal to everybody else in the world that the United States does not know what it's doing and that our model is wrong. And that undermines our capacity not just to project force because we don't have the money to do it, but our capacity to convince people that they shouldn't adhere to other ideologies which do them more harm, like the communist ideology in China. Dorian Key. Ben, she has stated it is unacceptable and unfair for the Taiwan question to be pushed down to successive generations. Xi has staked his legacy on Taiwanese reunification. And okay, I don't want to. I guess you have to deal with it when it comes up. Again, security commitments. And as James said, we win the sea and land war. This is a bad time for it. And I don't really think that Taiwan going out. First off, I absolutely think that Taiwan, for the sake of the soft power I was talking about, Taiwan cannot be seen as the aggressor or the instigator. Politics, optics, blah, blah, blah. It's important. It is important. James Morris King, the air war is a wash. This is why China is building all those micro-island bases in the South China Sea, not to beat the U.S. and its allies, but to make establishing sea air power in the region as time-consuming and annoying as possible. Ugh. We're like an hour into this, and we've only spoken about two things. Luckily, there was nothing else to talk about, really. But, I mean, this is fascinating stuff, but I'm not going to be able to get to the Magna Carta today. But I hope people enjoy the policy discussions that we're having, because I sure do. Dorian Key, Xi will move against Taiwan within 15 years. Yeah, well, hopefully in 10 years, we'll be in a much better place than we are today. Or even 10, depending on how long he is general secretary. Do they have term limits in the Grand Communists? I don't know what you mean by communist, but they do not have term limits. And Xi, they have a tradition which allows, they have a tradition in which every chair of the Communist Party and president serves in that leadership role for 2 successive terms of 5 years. The Communists have a 5-year plenary where they determine the leadership of the party and country. But Xi has already broken that. So there is no term limits. Xi has set himself up as president, really dictator for life. James King, possibly, replying to Dorian, possibly it's a question of whether there's a realignment of other Asian nations, which seemed possible at the outset of the Trump presidency, but now looks much less likely. Yes. Well, we can talk about the failed pivot to Asia and the, what was the Pacific Alliance? Oh, man. I forget it was the Pacific Trade Treaty that got shut down by progressives. But honestly, as somebody who watches closely what's happening to the democracies of the world, I was in favor of creating a trade agreement with Asian nations to shunt resources around that region and develop economies and countries that need that help, so that we would have a stronger foothold there. The failure of that treaty, and yeah, the treaty had problems, and yes, we could have done a lot better given our position, and corporations had far too much control, and we should really just lock corporations out of the negotiating rooms, which was Elizabeth Warren's plan, by the way, and y'all didn't elect. I'm sorry, I don't know about y'all, but that was Elizabeth Warren's plan, and I endorsed it heartily and said this is how we should move forward with trade agreements, and then we'd be in a much better place when creating these alliances. But we need to understand that trade agreements are political tools as much as they are economic tools, and that these political tools, for all those people who are like, the United States should not go to war, oh, but I don't like that these trade agreements are bad. These trade agreements are a huge part of American soft power that prevent wars in the future. So we need to take all these things into consideration when we determine the value of any individual trade agreement. I understand that's hard and it's not fun to do because these trade-offs are monstrous, but people dying in a war with China is, I think, in a long-term scenario, I don't want to have a bad trade deal for the United States, but that deal wasn't as bad as people thought it was. Again, it could have been better, and yeah, I would have done different things were I president. But these considerations are really ones that we need to keep in mind, because powerful trade deals that help us and our allies and make all these folks happy and create a community of nations and a pretense for engaging with each other, that is as important militarily to preventing war as building guns and tanks and planes. Military strategists there's been articles about how Dorian Key, there's been articles about how the U.S. will lose the ability to defend Taiwan within 10 years. If that's the case, isn't Taiwan screwed? Military strategists have said that. If that's the case, then Taiwan's screwed regardless, because we will not be able to hold our position in Asia. I mean, I guess unless you're saying like we wipe China off the map and they have no capacity to recover, or you just want to kick the can down the road another 10 or 20 years until they rebuild and re-challenge us. I mean, it's tough, man. James King, I have not read a single analysis with that conclusion that I take seriously about China overtaking the U.S. militarily within 10 years. Mostly because none of them have successfully predicted any of the impacts of emergent technological battlefields tactics and weaponry, i.e. cyber multi-domain command and control successfully. There was a great video about cyber multi-domain command and control, which I should share. But James, just so that folks know, he was a guest on the show once when I figured out how to do the dual people. He works in the defense community. Opium was from Afghanistan, India, etc. Dorian. So Ben, to clarify, if she basically annexes Hong Kong in all but name and replaces their British Commonwealth system of laws and government, you think we should do absolutely nothing, right? Kind of like when Germany swallowed up Czechoslovakia in 1937 without a shot, breaking international agreements. Kind of like that, except Germany didn't own Czechoslovakia. China rightly owns Hong Kong. It was taken from China in 1897. It was returned in 1997, and only because the West was still so much more powerful and richer than China could Britain say, you can have this back, but basically we still want to control it our way for another 50 years. And China had to say yes. So it's like that, but not at all, right? The politics and optics of it are entirely different. The morality of it is entirely different. And as much as I don't support the communist authoritarianism of the Chinese government, there's very little that you can do even on a moral basis. I do think that sanctions would be more than warranted. It would, kick the trade war into high gear. And this time, maybe you could get Britain and the European Union to come along because there is a violation of an actual treaty. You might be able to get the UN to come along. So it's not that we should do nothing, but it's so difficult to argue that a war should be predicated on that. Economic sanctions, generally speaking, and locking down alliances with other people, with other countries, other democracies around the world and other countries in Asia in a response to Chinese aggression, yes, but war, no. Or military intervention, no. Julian Ballington, I don't remember if evangelicals believe in a one or two state solution. God, okay. We want to see the solution. The one-state solution fails to see the complexity of the situation. Israel has not done the right thing by continually taking land. However, the Palestinians still sent incendiary balloons into Israel. They did not kill as many people as the Israelis, but the intent is there. Many in the BDS movement also want the complete destruction of Israel as a Jewish state. So it is the intent for destruction is still present in these methods. This is not to say that all people in the BDS movement believe this, but enough do. There has been such a false binary driven by the extremists. This is the same issue with the Me Too movement. We are being led by extremists, people who have been traumatized and have become extremists. I'm going to get in hot water because of this, but it seems to me that people are. What I can say is evangelicals do not support a two-state solution because the return of the Messiah is predicated on and requires the reestablishment of the kingdom of Israel. So they want Israel to take the whole thing and reestablish the kingdom so that Jesus can have his second coming. At least if you're a crazy evangelical. Obviously, there's evangelicals who don't take this literally and don't want that. But, I couldn't say if a majority of evangelicals really fall in that bucket. Beats me. As for complexity on both, everybody's killing each other all the time. That's the problem. It really, really makes tensions run hot. Dorian Key, U.S. loses any clout in East Asia and looks weak. If no other Asian nations and the EU and Great Britain aren't willing to stand with the United States, then our capacity to do anything is severely diminished and we look weak regardless. So, take your pick. Dorian, I think he meant sea and air, not land. Lol. I think he meant sea and land because he then specified about the air power. Simon Sachs, the New York Times noted Friday night that as McEnany displayed the president's check to HHS at the beginning, she appeared to hold up the real thing and revealed Trump's private Capital One bank account and routing numbers. What? Wait, in regards to, I'm gonna have to read that article. We'll talk about it tomorrow. That looks freaking nutso, but I don't know into what it's referring. So we'll get to it tomorrow. Dorian, Ben, do you really think China will become democratic ever? Possibly. Xi and the party grip on power is absolute, and China is set to be the world's largest democracy within 10 years. Do you mean largest country? No, that can't be. Economy. You must mean economy within 10 years. Yeah, that's true. All of that's true. And none of that's inconsistent with the idea that people will demand more from their government. I mean, did people think a colony of the largest country, largest, most powerful empire on earth would rebel and create a new country? No, but England had to deal with it. Like, these things happen. Julian Ballington continued. People are being led by an emotion caused by trauma. I have been hurt and traumatized, but I've also attempted to do the work to deal with my past issues. People are seeking revenge instead of justice. Deidre Levy replying to Julianne. It's also not easy to say who is, quote, Palestinian. There are many Israelis whose parents have, quote, Palestine as their birthplace. Julianne, you can say white people and drugs. The British were pretty big colonial assholes. We need to find ways to support democracies that do not lead to war. Money is great leverage. This is why we give aid to other countries. Trade deals do not seem any different than aid, at least in the objective. And last comment, and now we've been at this for like an hour and 12 minutes, and I'm going to sign off for the evening. This has been a delight, though. James, with the last comment, if anyone wants to really understand what the present and future of modern warfare looks like, this is an amazing, transparent primer on what the U.S. is actually doing / planning in this space for the future. Well, there you have it, folks. Even for those of us who really don't believe in war, I highly encourage us to understand the military challenges of the United States and of the globe, because only in doing so can those who want to prevent war understand why people would want to go to war and what tools are at the disposal of countries when they do so. If we want a humane future, we do need to understand all of the hard work that goes into killing people. Otherwise, it will be very difficult to make arguments against them. Just like I think that the best person to argue for gun control is somebody who understands how firearms work and therefore how they can best be limited. In any event, thank you all so much for tuning in tonight. It's been really fun. I will see you all tomorrow at 8:30.